Some Hong Kong job seekers among those lured to Southeast Asia and ended up working for cyber scam syndicates. Around 20% of child coronavirus patients in certain hospitals suffer from long COVID. And in the US, Trump foe Liz Cheney defeated in Wyoming GOP primary. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Many job seekers have recently been lured to Southeast Asia only to later be coerced into participating in illegal activities. This has led to those affected being detained or losing contact with families. The Immigration Department said more than a dozen Hong Kongers in Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia and Laos had lost contact with their families since the start of the year, and 5 of them remain missing. The police have received 12 such requests for assistance.
A number of job seekers, many from Taiwan, had reportedly been lured to Southeast Asian countries by promises of high-paying jobs but were later forced to work for cyber scam syndicates. In Hong Kong, the Immigration Department said it had received help requests from the families of 17 people who could not be reached in places such as Thailand and Myanmar. While 12 of them managed to escape, authorities are liaising with local police and consulates in an attempt to track down the remaining 5 Hong Kongers. We spoke to a US-based anti-human trafficking organization, which has so far rescued 50 ethnic Chinese after receiving help requests from the mainland, Taiwan and Malaysia.
We definitely heard from Hong Kong citizens being trapped in Myanmar. We have a couple of cases, and particularly KK compound, which is right opposite this Thailand river.
That is where a couple was forced to work for a cyber scam syndicate after being lured to Myanmar, according to Taiwan's TVBS. One victim recalled he was in deep pain after being constantly hit with an electric shock weapon. They were only freed half a year later after the payment of a ransom equivalent to 500,000 Hong Kong dollars. According to Taiwanese media, this KK compound is located in Mayawadi, an army-controlled town in southeastern Myanmar. Filled with casinos and bars, the area is notorious for hiding human trafficking victims. The infamous town is reportedly co-owned by Shi Zhijiang, a Chinese businessman wanted by both Beijing and the Interpol. He was arrested in Thailand last week for allegedly running illegal online gambling operations. The anti-human trafficking group revealed some of the difficulties they face when trying to help.
Your local country has to be first alerted with this matter first. And the second one will be to reach out to Cambodia authorities, but most of the time these people are corrupted. We do have cases in the past where they were actually criminals or they are taking advantage of the organization to ask for help and then to sell themselves away to another scam organization.
Wong added the group hopes to rescue more people by maintaining close contact with the authorities, consulates and local community groups in different countries.
The defendants in 2 court cases charged under the national security law could face non-jury trials. One of the cases involves Next Media founder Jimmy Lai and 3 affiliates of Apple Daily. The other involves 47 pan-Democrats charged over unofficial election primaries in 2021. Caleb Leung has details.
Next Digital founder Jimmy Lai, as well as 3 companies affiliated to Apple Daily, allegedly colluded with a foreign country, all with external elements to endanger national security. They were charged under the city's national security law. According to the judiciary's website, a case management hearing will be conducted at the High Court next Monday. As the hearing will be handled by 3 designated national security law judges, it appears the hearing will be held with no jury. Meanwhile, the case of the 47 pan-Democrats charged with conspiracy to commit subversion in relation to a series of unofficial election primaries has also finished the process of being transferred to the High Court. It is understood that the trial will also be conducted with no jury.
This case is now is a part of the court proceedings. I do not want to make too much comments on that. I think this is a most appropriate arrangement.
In a statement issued today, the judiciary said the purpose of the arrangement for a case to be tried by a panel of 3 judges without a jury is to ensure a fair trial and a due administration of justice. The statement added the arrangement does not undermine any legitimate rights and interests of the defendants. When making a decision, the Secretary for Justice would take into account the relevant provisions of the national security law and the individual circumstances of each case. Senior counsel Ronnie Tong, who is also an executive council member, believes a case not tried by a jury will not affect legal justice.
Jurors are not professionals. They are not professional lawyers. They're not legally trained to differentiate between his or her own political viewpoint and how such viewpoints might affect the outcome of a case.
The first person charged under the city's national security law, Tong Yin-kit, lost his judicial review bid to have his case heard by a jury. He was sentenced to 9 years in jail for incitement to secession and terrorist activities last year. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The city's daily COVID case tally rose to 5,757 today. 5,563 of the infections were locally acquired. Timothy Lee tells us more.
As the city's daily COVID case tally surpassed 5,500, authorities noted there have been more and more infected elderly people, particularly in the community. Infected individuals aged 60 or above made up 18% of the total infected population in early June, with a maximum of 40 elderly COVID patients entering hospital on a daily basis. In the first 2 weeks of August, the elderly accounted for 25% of the city's COVID infections, involving over 15,000 people. On Tuesday alone, 172 elderly people were admitted to hospital. Whether their symptoms are light or severe, at least 80% of people admitted to hospitals for COVID treatment belong to the elderly population. The government also said the duration of infected elderly people's hospital stays usually range from 10 days to 2 weeks. The list of pandemic-affected care homes continued to expand as 3 more elderly care homes and 1 care home for the disabled reported COVID cases. A total of 10 residents and 2 care home workers were infected. An elderly care home in Aberdeen reported 9 infections, with more than 80 residents in the care home needing to be quarantined. Authorities initially identified the source of infection to be an enrolled nurse.
For this nurse, we understand her to work on the first and the second floors, and we're now conducting investigation. She could be the source of infection.
48 schools reported 74 confirmed cases, with 4 schools suspending designated face-to-face classes. Another 4 COVID patients aged between 52 and 96 died. 3 of them have not received the 3rd jab, and the majority of them suffered from cancer. Meanwhile, the hospital authority found that around 20% of child coronavirus patients treated in certain hospitals during the 5th wave have since suffered from long COVID. Among those affected was a girl who went temporarily blind. The HK is now investigating the matter further. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Overseas, U.S. Representative Liz Cheney lost to a GOP primary challenger backed by former U.S. President Donald Trump in Wyoming on Tuesday. Cheney is a longtime Republican critic of Trump. She has played a prominent role in the congressional investigation into the January 6, 2021 Capitol insurrection. Daniel Rell tells us more.
Cheney's defeat in Wyoming by the Donald Trump-backed Harriet Hageman marks a significant political victory for the former U.S. president, who was reportedly set to launch a bid to return to the White House in 2024. Analysts say the ousting of Cheney, the daughter of Republican former Vice President Dick Cheney, is the latest sign of Trump's enduring influence within the Republican Party. Cheney is the top Republican on the House committee investigating the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. The panel is analyzing Trump's actions on that day as well as his false claims regarding the 2020 presidential election. In her concession speech, Cheney said she was not willing to go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election to win a primary. She added it would have required that she enabled his ongoing efforts to unravel the U.S. democratic system and attack the foundations of our republic, and that this was a path she could not and would not take. Hageman criticized Cheney's statements. She said it showed she cared little about the issues facing Wyoming. Meanwhile, Trump critic Alaska Republican U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski advanced from her primary. Murkowski voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment trial after the Capitol insurrection. Kelly Tshibaka, her GOP rival endorsed by former President Donald Trump, also progressed, as did another Trump-backed candidate, Republican Sarah Palin. All are vying for Alaska's only U.S. House seat. Both Wyoming and Alaska are staunchly Republican. This makes it unlikely that the results will influence whether US President Joe Biden's Democrats lose their thin congressional majorities in the November midterms. The Republicans are predicted to retake the House. Furthermore, they're believed to have a chance of gaining control of the Senate. Should they retake the House, the Republicans are expected to dissolve the January 6th investigation. Dan Orell, TVB News.
In Washington, President Joe Biden on Tuesday signed into law a $430 billion bill that is seen as the biggest climate package in American history. The Inflation Reduction Act aims to fight climate change, cut domestic greenhouse gas emissions, as well as lower prescription drug prices and high inflation. It will allow Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices for the elderly and help an estimated 13 million Americans pay for healthcare insurance by extending subsidies provided during the pandemic. The measure will be funded by new taxes on large companies and stepped-up enforcement actions to ensure corporations and the wealthy pay the taxes they owe. Democrats say it will help combat inflation by reducing the federal deficit. Independent economists largely agree but believe the process could take years. Republicans argue the legislation will do little to lower prices.
This bill is the biggest step forward on climate ever. And it's going to allow us to boldly take additional steps toward meeting all of my climate goals and the ones we set out when we ran. It includes ensuring that we create clean energy opportunities in frontline and fence-line communities that have been smothered by the legacy of pollution, and fight environmental injustice that's been going on for so long.
Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has defended giving himself extra powers during the coronavirus crisis, saying it was necessary because he felt it was his responsibility for the nation alone. Current Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is seeking an opinion from the Solicitor General on the legality of some of Morrison's moves.
Those safeguards were put in place for precautionary, for prudent and responsible reasons. And I didn't consider it at the time, given everything else that was going on and the other priorities we were dealing with, that it was a matter that needed to be raised at that point, because if I needed to use the powers, then I would have disclosed them with the Minister in particular. I'll come here.
Still head on tonight's news. Russia blames saboteurs for explosions at military facilities in Crimea. A warning about monkeypox spreading from humans to household pets. And the local unemployment rate falls to 4.3%. Welcome back. Russia blames saboteurs for explosions at a military base in Crimea that forced evacuations of citizens for the second time in as many weeks. Ukraine, while not saying directly it was involved, has hinted the strategy is to destroy supply lines supporting Russia's invasion. Matthew Bray reports.
The latest explosions at an ammunition depot in annexed Crimea are unsettling the Russians. Railway workers carrying out hasty repairs after shelling caused disruption to rail services, and some 3,000 people evacuated from villages around the ammunition dump. Sergei Aksionov, the top Russian official in the annexed territory, said all people in a 5-kilometre zone around the dump had been evacuated. A Ukraine presidential advisor has told the Guardian newspaper that the aim is to destroy Russian logistics, create chaos within their own forces and potentially open up a new front in the 6-month war. Ukraine leader Volodymyr Zelensky told his people to steer clear of Russian facilities, adding any destruction of such places is saving Ukrainian lives. The Kremlin demands Kyiv recognize Crimea as part of Russia for ending the war. Ukraine has vowed to drive Russians into the Black Sea. Satellite images show the Rozhony, the first grain ship to have left Ukraine, has ended up in Russian ally Syria. Its tracker was turned off Cyprus to hide its movements. Now it appears to be supplying wheat to the Assad regime. Another vessel has left Odessa with wheat purchased by the UN World Food Programme. It's on its way to Ethiopia, a country considered at risk of famine. Meanwhile, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres will travel Thursday to Lviv in western Ukraine for a meeting with Zelensky and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. They are expected to discuss further grain shipments and a possible fact-finding excursion to the Russian-controlled nuclear plant at Zaporizhzhia. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Estonia will close its border to more than 50,000 Russians with previously issued visas, the first country in the European Union to do so. According to Estonia's foreign minister, Tallinn is considering closing the border completely to all Russians. It comes as Estonia also decided to remove all public Soviet memorials in the majority Russian-speaking city of Narva. The reason being that tension is high in the city and Tallinn accuses Russia of trying to exploit the past to divide Estonian society. The military first removed a Soviet tank, and a common grave of victims of World War II will get a neutral grave marker. Estonians have a mixed view of history, having been invaded by Nazi and Soviet forces and having combatants on both sides. U.S. health officials are warning people infected with monkeypox to stay away from household pets since the animals could be at risk of catching the virus. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has had the advice in place as monkeypox spreads in the U.S., but it gained new attention after a report from France about an Italian greyhound that caught the virus was published in a medical journal last week. The dog belongs to a couple who said they sleep alongside the animal. The two men were infected with monkeypox and wound up with lesions and other symptoms. The greyhound later developed lesions and was diagnosed with the virus. Monkeypox infections have been detected in rodents and other wild animals, which can spread the virus to humans. But the authors called it the first report of monkeypox infection in a domesticated animal like a dog or a cat.
And I would say this is definitely not a reason to panic. This is an isolated case so far. But, as there are more and more human cases develop, we could see changes and start seeing more infections in animals. And so I think it's important to get the messaging out that reducing transmission between humans and animals is really important.
The city's jobless rate decreased to 4.3% in May to July from the 4.7% recorded in the April to June period. The unemployment rate decreased across almost all major economic sectors. The underemployment rate also fell from 3% in April to June to 2.2% in May to July. Secretary for Labour and Welfare Chris Sun said economic activity in Hong Kong is expected to be further revived in the coming months. That's provided that the local epidemic situation remains under control and due to the support from Phase 2 of the consumption voucher scheme. Chief Executive John Lee attended a business forum organized by the Chinese General Chamber of Commerce today. He said the decision to shorten the hotel quarantine period for arrivals from overseas and Taiwan is supported by the community. The CE added that he plans to attend the APEC meeting in Bangkok in November.
My preliminary goal is to reduce the degree of inconvenience to travelers without bringing about additional risks to the mainland's epidemic situation. It is time for us to tell the world about our distinguished achievements with pride and confidence. That is why in November, I plan to attend the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in Bangkok. I want to reassure our partners in person of Hong Kong's firm commitment to regional cooperation and tell them the good story of Hong Kong.
The results of the remark scores for the Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education examination have been released after a rechecking process by the Appeal Review Committee. One student from Diocesan Boys School subsequently became this year's 9th super top scorer. The student acquired 5 double star in economics along with 6 other subjects, as well as the extended maths modules after his HKDSE exam scores were rechecked. He will pursue a degree in the medical school of the Chinese University of Hong Kong and participate in the university's medicine program Global Physician Leadership stream. The Hong Kong Examinations and Assessment Authority will inform examinees about the rechecked exam scores via written notice or text. That's the news. Thanks for watching.